And welcome to Faith Nation. I'm Jenna Bratter.
And I'm John Jessup. Well, even as the FBI launches an investigation into sexual assault allegations, President Trump is standing by Judge Brett Kavanaugh.
In a Rose Garden press conference today, the president said the Bureau should move as quickly as possible as they look into Dr. Christine Ford's claims.
I think the FBI should do what they have to do to get to the answer. Now, with that being said, I'd like it to go quickly. And the reason I'd like it to go quickly, very simple. It's so simple. Because it's unfair to him at this point.
Now, the FBI investigation is supposed to wrap up by the end of this week, so the Senate can vote on his confirmation. But as Amber Strong explained, some believe more delays are ahead in the confirmation process.
The FBI is looking to follow up into any new information when it comes to those sexual assault allegations against Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh. In a surprise turn of events, Republican Senator Jeff Flake suggesting a delay to the Senate floor vote.
We ought to do what we can to make sure that we do all due diligence with
and laying the current guidelines of a one-week investigation, limited to the current and credible allegations. But some Senate Democrats say that may not be enough time. Others concerned the White House may be dictating the terms of the investigation.
I've never heard that the White House, either under this president or other presidents, is saying, well, you can't interview this person, you can't look at this time period, you can only look at these people from one side of the street.
Press Secretary Sarah Sanders says they're staying out of it.
The White House isn't intervening, we're not micromanaging this process.
Regardless, Senate Democrats say the hearing itself gives insight into Kavanaugh's political leaning.
As I watched him, part of me thought, this is a man who believes that he did nothing wrong and he is completely unjustly accused. There were some lines that he delivered that were sharper, more partisan, more, this is the Clintons paying me back.
Flake says he empathizes with Kavanaugh's anger.
It was anger, but if I were unjustly accused, that's how I would feel as well.
Many people have protested Kavanaugh. Others have stood by him, calling Senate offices in support of the judge. Now, that investigation has to be wrapped up by the end of the week, but that doesn't mean it's over. House Democrats say they could launch an investigation themselves should they take the House in November. Amber Strong, CBN News, Washington.
All right, thank you, Amber. Well, Abigail Robertson is on Capitol Hill, and she joins us now. Abigail, now that the FBI is pursuing this investigation into Kavanaugh, what does this week look like? We're hearing that there could be a vote before the week's over.
Yes, well, lawmakers are anxious to see what the FBI comes back with as they investigate these accusations. And Senate Democrats, as Amber reported, are saying that this investigation is limited in scope, and they say that it's not good enough. They've released a list of witnesses that they want the FBI to interview. But Senator John Cornyn put out a list of quotes earlier today that showed Senate Democrats who, before Friday, before it was agreed that this FBI investigation would happen, it showed Senate Democrats quotes of them calling for exactly what we're seeing right now, a 7-day, week-long FBI investigation. So Republicans are saying that Democrats are now just moving the goalpost. There's also been some claims that the FBI, in their previous 6 investigations into Judge Kavanaugh's background, might have missed some things because they were not specifically looking for sexual misconduct or alcohol abuse. But Republican Senator Tom Cotton from Arkansas, he tweeted today that he has served as a character witness for many people undergoing FBI background checks, and that they've always asked him about potential alcohol abuse for people that they're investigating. And so he tweeted, and I quote, "You really think the FBI missed that in 6 background checks of Judge Kavanaugh?" So he believes that if there was any of this in Judge Kavanaugh's history, that the FBI would have found it before this latest investigation.
Abby, Kavanaugh, of course, is being investigated, but some Republicans are calling for a completely different investigation. What are they trying to do here?
Well, Senator Lindsey Graham and Tom Cotton are saying that the FBI should look into how the letter that Dr. Ford wrote to Senator Feinstein ever got released and leaked to the media. They said that Dr. Ford made it clear in her testimony that she wanted to remain anonymous and she did not ever want to be the subject of this media circus. And they also want to know why Dr. Ford's lawyers never relayed the information that staff from the Senate Judiciary Committee would have gone to her in California and interviewed her and questioned her and potentially avoided the media circus that we saw here in D.C. where she had to come testify publicly. So they have a lot of questions about that, but Senator Feinstein has denied that her staff or herself leaked the letter that she sent to them that Dr. Ford sent to them back in August. And also Ryan Grimm from The Intercept, who first reported on the letter's existence, said that it did not come from Senator Feinstein's staff.
Abigail Robertson, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, Chief Political Analyst David Brody is here to offer some insight on what lies ahead. David, what can we expect in terms of a timetable? Really what we're looking at is the timetable and the final vote and how this will all play out this week.
Yeah, I think it's going to be about a week, maybe Monday or Tuesday of next week. So basically what's going to happen is if all goes according to plan, right, yeah. All of that, 75 asterisks. But on Friday is when the FBI investigation would apparently be done. Then Mitch McConnell will file what they call a cloture motion. So at that point, you have 72 hours to let it percolate, and then there'll be a vote on cloture. In other words, to cut off debate and let's move. And so that would be basically on Monday. And then after they take a vote on cloture, which means you need 50 votes there, then there'll actually be 30 more hours of debate. So that's why we're thinking maybe into Tuesday, because if the cloture vote is Monday, then comes Tuesday. And that's when the final vote should be, if all goes as planned.
David, did Democrats have any other cards to play here if the investigation checks out?
Well, you know, the media, obviously, and I say a card, you know, I don't want to be, being a bit facetious, but look, the Washington Post and New York Times, I mean, if you look at the headlines of what they're doing, the stories they're doing, it's coming from that Democrat playbook. I mean, and what I mean by that is that if you see Amy Klobuchar or Bernie Sanders or any Democrats talking about, like, for example, perjury, that Kavanaugh committed perjury, then all of a sudden the New York Times and Washington Post are not only running stories about what they said, but they're also kind of advancing that type of storyline. So I think that is a concern. But I think the biggest card they have to play is this idea that they will say that this FBI investigation was too narrow, that it didn't go broad enough, and they'll want more of a delay. Now, the question then becomes, will Jeff Flake, Murkowski, and Collins, who want a narrow scope, will they say, well, you know what, it was too narrow, we need more time? And if they flake, so to speak, then there's problems.
Yeah. You know, yesterday I was on the plane back into D.C. and I was sitting next to a woman who was probably more liberal in her leanings. But anyway, there are a lot of questions over why Dianne Feinstein and the Democrats didn't call for an investigation early on when they got this letter, when they knew about these allegations from Dr. Ford. And this woman, her thought was that it was to protect Dr. Ford. If they had gone through with an investigation, it would have leaked out. David, what do you have to say to that?
Well, sure. I mean, that is what that narrative in the liberal camp will be, that, you know, she was just doing it to protect Dr. Ford's identity. The problem is that she had the information. We know Dianne Feinstein's camp had the information. We also know the Democratic Congresswoman from California, Anna Eshkew, also had the information. So eventually that information was going to get out there, and guess what? It did. And then the question becomes, from an investigative standpoint, who leaked it? Who put it out there? So, I mean, Dianne Feinstein's been around Washington long enough to know that if you've got something on July 30th, a letter like this, that's getting out there. Some Democratic operative, no one's saying it's Feinstein, but Feinstein might have brought it up to, who knows, a lawyer, and a lawyer then all of a sudden leaked it. So the point is that she may have had noble intentions at the beginning, but to not do anything with it, she should have realized that this is going to get out anyhow.
David, we only have about a minute left, and I think we've all seen by now the Saturday Night Live skit where Matt Damon really pilloried Judge Kavanaugh. There's also been a few scathing articles written about, or editorials suggesting that he should not be coaching girls' teams. What's the role of the media in all of this?
Well, it has been somewhat despicable, and I know you asked me that question about a week ago or so, and I said, well, they've been relatively okay here. It's gone off the rails. It's gone horribly wrong. Some of these headlines, I mean, I just wrote some of them down. They're talking about white male rage now, for example. This is Washington Post, New York Times, this was the hour of white male rage. Someone else saying, the Esquire magazine saying, Brett Kavanaugh's indignation was the sound of privileged white male entitlement. Another newspaper headline with white male entitlement, and I can just go on and on. So this is the narrative from the media, and the problem is that it's an echo chamber. It gets out there, and then all of a sudden Saturday Night Live picks up on it, and it becomes cultural at that point, and then it affects the court of public opinion.
Right.
David Brody, thank you very much.
You bet.
Thanks, David.
Well, President Trump says the FBI will have free rein in its investigation of Judge Kavanaugh. But what exactly will the FBI do? CBN News national security correspondent Eric Rosales reports.
With a Friday deadline looming, sources tell CBN News the FBI will concentrate its investigation on 4 witnesses in the Judge Brett Kavanaugh investigation. Sources say agents will concentrate on the women who made assault accusations and a high school friend. Sources say the Bureau will take a closer look at the allegations by Dr. Christine Blasey Ford, along with Julie Swetnick and friend Mark Judge. CBN News has learned Deborah Ramirez, who accused Judge Kavanaugh of exposing himself to her during their freshman year at Yale, spoke with the FBI for about 2 hours over the weekend. Sources say she provided the FBI with the list of witnesses who might corroborate her story.
Ms. Ramirez will be interviewed by the FBI. And Mark Judge will be asked, did you ever witness Brett Kavanaugh drug or gang rape women? And I think that'll be the scope of it.
FBI sources say conducting an investigation under a tight deadline is nothing new. Sources add it's important to note the White House requests the investigation and is the one who has provided the results. The FBI will not provide results to any other body, and the final report will likely weigh heavily on interviews. The White House can order investigators to further examine the allegations if their findings open new avenues of inquiry. President Trump insists he is not interfering with the process.
I want it to be comprehensive. I actually think it's a good thing for Judge Kavanaugh. I think it's actually a good thing, not a bad thing. I think it's a good thing. Now, with that being said, I'd like it to go quickly.
But Democrats continue to question the scope of the background check.
The credibility of Judge Kavanaugh, that's what's before us right now.
Republican Senator Bill Cassidy on Saturday accused Democrats of strategically attempting to delay the U.S. Supreme Court confirmation.
I think most people on the Republican side see it for what it's worth. It is a pattern of leaks set to delay and to character assassinate.
And just a reminder, President Trump did remind the public that this is the 7th investigation by the FBI, and he also said that wrapping up a conference like this, it's going to be a sad day if somebody actually turns down a position like this just because of the scrutiny that they receive.
Eric, so we know the FBI is doing its investigation. What happens when it concludes and offers its report? Who does it go to? Does it go to the White House? Does it go to Congress?
That's what a lot of people don't realize. All this information, and it's a report with not a recommendation, but it's only the findings are going to go directly to the White House. And the White House is going to decide on whether or not it's going to be released to the Judiciary Committee and then, in fact, to the full Senate. Now, we know that more than likely that's going to happen because otherwise that would be political suicide. But as of right now, it's up to the White House. But I'm also hearing that we're possibly, the FBI, according to my sources, that the FBI could wrap up its investigation by Wednesday night or even Thursday morning. So it's going to be an interesting time.
Yeah, Eric, there's a lot of questions about who the FBI will interview. It's not limited in its scope, is it?
It's not limited in the scope, as the president said today. But I am hearing that the 4 people are going to be interviewed. It's going to be the 3 women and then also the high school friend. That's what I'm hearing. And one of the women was interviewed for about 2 hours this past weekend.
All right, Eric Rosales, thank you very much.
Thanks, Eric.
Well, what the president has to say about a new trade agreement.
And as the FBI prepares for its investigation into the Kavanaugh allegations, the Supreme Court begins its new term today. Paul Strand, who covers the Supreme Court for CBN News, joins us now for more. Paul, the Supreme Court starts its session without a 9th justice. How will that affect the decisions made this term?
Well, first of all, welcome to the Supreme Court on the first Monday in October, and it feels like it's in the 90s out here, so excuse the lack of a jacket. It's just broiling. Okay, so without a 9th justice, what does that mean? It means probably many of the decisions, since the court's so evenly split, being 4-4. Does that mean that nothing happens? No, it means the last court that decided that issue, their decision stands. And with so many of the courts in the country being liberal, maybe the Democrats are happy with that. Here's one other thing. The court can decide in the 4-4 decisions to go back later and hear those cases over again when they do get a 9th justice. So this is maybe another reason for the Democrats to be holding this off as long as possible in case they can get back in control and maybe they can decide who the 9th justice is going to be and then hear those cases over again and maybe get them decided in a direction that the Democrats would be more pleased with.
Has the court had terms without a ninth justice in the past?
Yeah, there have been many times in the past where it's actually gone on for months without a ninth justice. And in fact, originally the court did not have 9 justices. Through the years, it's had different numbers. So no, this is not an extraordinary thing. Now here's something interesting I learned, which is that the justice, as soon as he does get picked, as soon as he does get confirmed, he can go on to the court. So this does not, whenever Judge Kavanaugh gets voted on, then boom, this problem is over. They don't have to wait for the next term to start.
Now, Paul, what are some of the cases on the docket this term that we should be looking out for?
There's no one big case that's making me go like, whoa, this is a big one. But there are interesting issues. For instance, a death penalty case that says that if the prisoner can no longer remember the crime or remember what the, in other words, he's gotten mentally shaky, does he still deserve the death penalty when he can't even, know that he's guilty? So there's an interesting case. Another one is deciding this. When, Congress often, they're supposed to be the only ones who pass the laws, but sometimes they'll say to a federal agency, a bureaucracy, you decide most of what we do after we pass this law. You decide how it gets implemented, things like that. They have a case that'll talk much more about this idea of how much can agencies decide how a law is enforced. Okay, another couple of cases that interest me at least. There's one about this a frog in Mississippi. Now this frog used to live in Louisiana, and there's some land interests there. They grow trees on this one piece of property. There's a family that's owned much of this land for decades, and the government says they want to restore some of this land to the shape where this frog from Mississippi could go there and survive. The frog is almost extinct right now, and the thing is, the folks that have the land, they say this would cost them about $34 million in revenue over the years, and that it'll take many tens of millions to restore the land. Now the opponents say none of this is true, but whatever, there's a case about can the government just step in and take this land and tell people you can't make money on your own land, or you have to restore it for a frog that maybe can't survive there. Another interesting case is about a woman has a farm where somebody decided maybe there are gravestones on her farm in Pennsylvania, and the city there is, or maybe it's the state, is saying this has to become an area where you have to put a walk in there, you have to keep this area, not grow anything out there, you have to let the public in to see it. The woman that owns the farm, which has been in her family for many, many decades, she's pretty outraged about this. She says, what about the fact that this is my private property? So they're going to hear about, can she take this to the federal court? Because right now it stands that you can't take an issue like this from a state and take it in the federal courts. So there's another interesting decision about who's got the power when it comes to your land. All right, back to you folks.
All right, thank you, Paul. Well, what the president has to say about a new trade agreement with Canada next.
Well, welcome back. After weeks of negotiations, the administration is announcing a new trade agreement between the United States and Canada. White House correspondent Ben Kennedy joins us from the North Lawn with the details. Ben, how is this different from the past trade deals?
Well, John, for one, the president made it clear, do not confuse this new deal with NAFTA. This is the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, or USMCA. It aims to facilitate free, fair, and reciprocal trade. Now, here's the breakdown. The deal is expected to open the Canadian dairy market to American farmers and give greater access to sell American-grown produce. It's set to increase exports of American wheat, dairy, poultry, and eggs, to name a few. USMCA also protects American workers and American industry by ensuring more auto parts and automobiles are made at home. It also promises protection to Canada's auto industry from tariffs. The president says the deal is beneficial for America, Canada, and Mexico.
A very, very good deal for all three. It puts us in a position that we've never been in before. It's very good when you look at the world and what the world is doing, and when you look at the unfair trade practices that countries are using against the United States. This is a terrific deal.
Now, the trilateral agreement is designed to transform North America into a manufacturing powerhouse. President Trump again says the deal is good for all three countries, which is why they signed off on it just before the midnight deadline. The president now plans to sign the new trade deal by the end of November and then submit it to Congress. Lawmakers are expected to vote in early 2019. Ben Kennedy, CBN News, the White House.
And Phil Kerpen is the president of American Commitment, and he joins us now. Phil, thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
What are your thoughts on this new trade deal?
Well, I haven't read the whole thing yet, but from the summary documents I've seen, this is a pretty good deal. And in particular, it's really important that it got done ahead of this deadline because it lifts a lot of uncertainty about this getting done and whether we might just have a termination of NAFTA without a replacement. And I think that's why there's a big sense of relief in financial markets that the deal did get done in time and that it looks pretty good. And in particular, it's pretty strong on intellectual property protections, especially for the biopharmaceutical industry. They got 10 years of protection, data exclusivity for biologics. That was a big want for that industry, which is, of course, a critical U.S. industry. It looks like U.S. dairy is going to get access to the Canadian market for the first time. That's another big victory. And it looks like the auto provisions are pretty favorable also. The auto industry has reacted very favorably to those. So it looks like on the major deal points that people were worried about and looking at, we did pretty well.
Yeah, Phil, you know, the president, in his speech, he knocked what he called babies for criticizing him in terms of using tariffs with other countries to bring them to the negotiating table. How did tariffs play a role in getting Canada to the table this time around?
Well, I think there was a real fear in Canada that the president was going to go through with auto tariffs and that was going to have a massive disrupting impact on the Canadian economy. And we don't know if he's actually going to go through with those auto tariffs or not. I'm a big critic, an opponent of those tariffs. But if he does, Canada will now be exempt from them. Canada and Mexico under this agreement are exempt from any potential tariffs. And so I think that that was a big desire, a big must-have for the Canadian side, and the pressure for that, the need for that, really came from the fact that the president put those auto tariffs on the table. There's also relief in this agreement from the metal tariffs, the aluminum and steel tariffs that are presently in effect, and so that also, I think, put a lot of pressure on them to come to the table. You know, I've said all along, the tariffs are a very dangerous game economically because they do cause real economic harm in the United States, but if they can be used as leverage rather than something that stays in place long term, if they can be used as leverage for more favorable outcomes in trade agreements, then we have to judge them by the results. And in this case, at least, it does seem to have certainly helped get Canada back to the table and get this deal done.
Yeah, Phil, in this whole trade agreement, who do you think are the winners? Who are the losers?
Well, I think President Trump's a winner. I also think that Justin Trudeau's a winner. I think he really needed to get this deal done for his own reelection next year. I think it's important that he did, and it's going to be a positive for him. So it's interesting. Far left Canadian Prime Minister and the conservative American president being able to get a deal done, I think will be positive for both of them. The losers, I think, are all the political naysayers who said a deal was impossible, it wouldn't get done, it wasn't, you know, that the president was crazy. And I think they've got a lot of egg on their face because this did get done and it got done ahead of the deadline.
All right, Phil Kerpen, always great to have you. Thanks again for joining us.
My pleasure.
And we will be right back.
Well, the Medal of Honor is the highest military decoration that can be awarded to service members.
And today, President Trump presented the medal to former Army Staff Sergeant Ronald J. Schur, the second for actions in Afghanistan back in 2008.
Ron was the only medic for the team. Roughly 200 well-trained and well-armed terrorists ambushed the American and Afghan forces. Soon, Ron heard his comrade call his name. He was very, very seriously hurt. But Ron braved enemy fire to rush to his friend.
After saving that one soldier, Schur began fighting through more gunfire to make his way up the mountain to treat and stabilize 4 more soldiers. A true American hero.
Well, that's going to do it for tonight's Faith Nation.
Have a great evening, and we'll see you back here tomorrow.